Thank you very much, and thank Aqua for their good work that they did as partners in the passage of this legislation. Mr. Fallon, Program Manager, California Water Foundation, the other partner in this.
Thank you very much. My name is Andrew Fallon, and I'm a program officer with the Water Foundation, an initiative of the Resources Legacy Fund. We invest in policies and practices that we hope will meet the water needs of California's farm, cities, and environment now and into the future. The Water Foundation is proud to have been involved in the passage of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and leading up to the passage of that act, we commissioned studies, analysis, and so forth to evaluate the problems of facing California's groundwater. We also convened stakeholders and published policy recommendations that helped inform the outlines of the new law, and of course provided support to leaders in the legislature and with the administration to get it across the finish line. We're grateful to all of you who were involved in that discussion, and all of the folks gathered here, not only for passing this important landmark legislation, but also seeing its effective implementation. I think one of the greatest initial challenges of the new law is that it's a steep learning curve. There are a lot of people out there who find this daunting. The Water Foundation's been making investments in materials and reports to help inform stakeholders and try to educate the public about how to best engage. We've published helped fund publication of a handbook, legal guidance, reports on stakeholder engagement, as well as reports on setting measurable goals and objectives for sustainable groundwater management. In addition to these reports, the Water Foundation has funded entities such as the Sonoma County Farm Bureau and Butte County, who are developing replicable pilot projects on issues such as GSA formation and data collection and coordination. Looking ahead, the Water Foundation's immediately focused in three areas: development and implementation of the regulations, capitalizing on SGMA to stimulate groundwater recharge projects, and securing sufficient funding for local and state agencies to implement the Act. The Department of Water Resources regulations for groundwater sustainability plans, as we've heard, are really the key next step in implementation in the Act, and we applaud the Department for the extensive outreach process that they've undertaken, and we look forward to working with them on development of their new rules. Regulations have to stay true to both the letter and intent of the law. They should be in clear and as unambiguous as possible to define both the direction that provide direction to the department and all parties affected by SGMA. I think uncertainty and a lack of clarity is only going to come to haunt us at the back end of this, and so clarity on what's expected at the front end is important. We have convened 4 roundtable discussions similar to what we did during the establishment of the Act, and we did this in 2015. We have another one scheduled for this Friday, and we're hoping to bring people from very diverse perspectives together to try to find some common ground and also identify those areas where there are differences. One of the reasons why we were excited about SGMA in the first place is that it puts forth a framework for managers, investors, and water users to have greater confidence to develop groundwater recharge and storage projects. Following the passage of SGMA, voters passed Prop 1, which included funding for new water storage projects, which include groundwater. And if done well, groundwater storage opens new opportunities for advancing water markets and creating greater flexibility in our water system to benefit all beneficial uses. The Water Foundation and organizations like the Almond Board have also been engaged in research and analysis of new methods for groundwater recharge that rely on diverting floodwaters into actively cultivated lands. Preliminary results showed these methods to be quite promising and a great complement to more traditional dedicated infiltration basins. The department should do all it can to ensure that its regulations are structured to promote groundwater recharge. Similarly, the Water Commission's regulations for Prop 1 storage funding should also be structured to recognize new opportunities brought about by SGMA and also facilitate funding for groundwater storage.
And your last comment?
My last comment, I guess the biggest challenge facing this effort is funding. Local agencies need the funding to be able to collect information, to be able to bring together stakeholders, and to be able to take action to implement. And the DWR, State Board, Fish and Wildlife, they need resources as well. These are big tasks in front of them, and they're going to need steadily increasing support and resources to be able to execute. So thank you very much for your time. We look forward to continuing to be an active participant in this effort.
Thank you to the California Water Foundation for your continued involvement in this, very important. So let's go on to Chairman Massetti. Welcome, and thank you very much for coming today.
Morning, thank you. Water rights, that's what this is about. And you bet the tribes paid attention when we started talking about water rights and state jurisdiction. With that being said, the tribes' concerns were addressed in SGMA.
Right.
And I thank you all for that. Okay, so our concerns are addressed. So what does that mean? Now we have to try to educate the Department of Water Resources on tribal law. And I have to commend Department of Water Resources, David Gutierrez, and especially Aniceto Augustines, the tribal advisor. I've personally been with those folks through meetings throughout the state explaining, okay, what's the state doing to us as tribal governments? Well, they're not doing anything. What they're offering is an opportunity to work together. In SGMA, we recognize, and this was one of the main things, you folks both are aware of this, is that reserve water rights and tribal law are recognized. That was great, it was done. So that's major. Now we go to the advisory group, and like I say, the Department of Water Resources has been outstanding in terms of trying to explain to tribal governments throughout this state what it means, how it works, how it affects our reserve water rights, okay? We have the opportunity to participate with GSAs if we want. Now you have the MOA, MOU, and a JPA if tribes want to. And so that's up to each government, tribal government in the state to do that if they prefer. What we're addressing now is what do you do with an area, maybe a GSA this form, that doesn't want to deal with tribes? Mr. Gutierrez, we're dealing with that in the advisory group meeting now. We're explaining right now, what is tribal fee land, tribal trust land, what are assignments, allotments? So when the folks in the department are developing these, they'll understand the Indian terminology and the status of federal land. So they've been outstanding. I can't say enough about Mr. Gutierrez and the whole Department of Water Resources in terms of working together to develop an understanding. So this outreach is outstanding. So it is, as far as implementation being done, I think very well. We got to continue to educate our tribal governments throughout the state, because it's us versus you, and it's not. In this case, let's work together. As we said previously, water knows no boundary. So we need to work together on this, and I thank you, and I think it's working as far as tribal governments. As they get more educated on it, this will work. Thank you.
Thank you very much for taking the time
You didn't have to cut me off. See, I'm done.
I really appreciate hearing about the good relationship with DWR and outreach, and thank you for your role that you're playing. Mr. Bunce, welcome.
Yes.
You're representing Barona Band, but others as well, correct?
Well, only the Barona Band today. Originally, Chairman Clifford LaChapa wished to be here, but he couldn't be here because this is the last Tuesday of the month when the monthly tribal meeting is occurring, and he had to be certain to get back in time to run it. Anyway, the Barona Band is a small tribe in rural San Diego County, about 6,000 acres, about 600 members, and it's been forced to rely entirely on groundwater. Historically, it used to be part of the Capitan Grande Band, which had an ancestral home astride the free-flowing San Diego River, but frankly, they were kicked out. In 1932, Congress authorized the county of San Diego to condemn the bottomland of that reservation because the county wanted to build a dam and flood the place. So the tribe was moved from being on its ancestral lands astride a free-flowing river to being on, frankly, dry land several miles away where it has to rely entirely on groundwater. And in the course of doing that, it has been for 70 years its own groundwater sustainability agency. It has no inflow or outflow really from anywhere else. It relies entirely on groundwater, and it manages its groundwater resources quite well. It knows what the well levels are. It knows what the demands are. It knows what nature puts in and knows what nature will allow it to take out. And that's how it's survived ever since. So it's very interested in groundwater and how groundwater management develops, particularly in San Diego County. By coincidence, it happens not to be in one of the 515 of the identified basins. But still, it's very interested in the subject because it affects all Indian reservations, directly or indirectly, in the ways that Chairman Mazzetti is talking about. Federal Reserve rights are important to everyone. We certainly are glad that the committee was able to accommodate tribal concerns in SGMA in that way. The challenge now is to make sure that the groundwater sustainability agencies realize that there's something different going on here and educate themselves as to how to handle it. I think that Chairman Mazzetti is spot on in saying that the real value of the Tribal Advisory Group to the department is that the Tribal Advisory Group is educating the department on how to answer those questions that we've been told are already coming in from the GSAs. The GSAs are asking just what he says. What's an allotment? We can help them educate the GSAs and try to work cooperatively. It depends a lot on who the GSA in your locality turns out to be. I mean, frankly, there are some governmental entities in San Diego County that the Barona Band, at least, has a very poor relationship with, and for very good reason. We don't trust them. But there are other agencies, such as, say, the County Water Authority, that we do have a good relationship with because we've interacted with them before. They've been upfront with us, had no particular problems with them. So it really depends on who turns out to be the groundwater sustainability agency in, say, San Diego County for the Barona Band. Barona is very interested in working with the department to make sure that the regulations that do come out do cover the things that need to be covered and do it in a way that reflect the particular little quirks of federal law that affect tribes. And I'm going to be like Chairman Mazzetti and wind up quickly here without being cut off by adding only one more thing, which is the department's—
You've been here before.
Yes. The department's website is bang up good. It's gotten better, and the GIS component, the visuals are great. I can use them to show my clients what's going on. Yeah. They're very visual people, and they really appreciate being able to see these things. The department's website helps a lot.
Thank you very much. That's important for all agencies. We're seeing more and more importance.
Well, I can go longer, but I won't.
He went over. Okay. Let us move on. Supervisor Gibson from San Luis Obispo County, you're a member of CSAC, and I know you already also have a 170-acre ranch. So you've got a lot.
I have a lot,
stake in this
a lot
discussion.
going on. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as a county supervisor, of course, it's a challenge to be as brief as my colleagues at the table here, but I'll try.
5 minutes.
As you know, as you all know, counties are in the business of implementing state mandates and programs, and we fully understand the importance of our groundwater resources to our well-being, and we take our role in SGMA implementation very seriously. We are moving forward. In the early stages, there are many positive things to report. The Department of Water Resources has been very helpful. Communication has been good, and they have been quite timely in their response to SGMA questions. Exceptional outreach, as you heard from Mr. Gutierrez. Both CSAC and the Rural County Representatives of California, which we all know as RCRC, concur with this sentiment, and DWR staff has been quite open to suggestions made by the CSAC-RCRC Joint Working Group on SGMA, and we appreciate that very much. The facilitation services provided by DWR, the grant funding under Prop 1 have been most greatly appreciated, And in San Luis Obispo County, we also appreciate the in-person appearances by DWR and State Water Board staff, who have both reinforced their commitment to local solutions and the state's intention to step in should local solutions fail, and that's very important to us. Let me go briefly through a couple of spot examples from counties around the state based on an informal survey conducted by CSAC. Things have gone well in Santa Cruz County. They already had a JPA in place managing one of their priority basins, and they're updating that JPA to qualify as a GSA. Placer County is working well with its partners and sees no issues in making the timelines for establishing GSA and moving on to GSP. Kings County has several groundwater basins, all of which cross county lines. They are been working cooperatively with various agencies to establish the appropriate GSPs and may participate in JPAs later as that is required. Kern, Inyo, and San Bernardino County all share the Indian Wells Valley Basin, which was recently designated in critical overdraft. And they have reached a consensus to form a single GSA moving forward under a single GSP. And I think that is a particularly positive result that we should all celebrate. Ventura County, Fox Canyon Water Management District has been granted GSA status on 4, working on the other 8 basins in the county. And my own county of San Luis Obispo provides quite a range of issues. I can speak, if you're interested, to Senator Wolk's questions about emergency regulations, which we have taken on through our land use authority. But we have a basin in critical overdraft that touches 4 counties. We have a partially adjudicated basin in the coastal zone. We have an adjudicated basin with fringe areas that are not that are outside the adjudication, and they have to comply with SGMA. We have a basin in active litigation, but not formal adjudication, and multiple GSA eligible agencies over that basin. We have boundary adjustment issues where the technical data don't conform to jurisdictional boundaries. And we have an important effort underway as we speak to establish and fund a hybrid water district to try to represent what otherwise would be white areas over our arguably most important basin. But again, we've appreciated the cooperation of DWR and the State Board in our efforts to craft specific solutions to each of the unique situations that occur in our county. So generally no real surprises, but there are some shared concerns going forward. Forming these GSAs and negotiating this is a time-consuming process. There's no doubt about that. Mr. Boland referenced the issues about some agencies self-determining that they might be eligible to be GSAs. We would appreciate further clarity from the state in terms of which agencies are and are not. Some of these issues need to be resolved sooner rather than later. Coordination agreements will be important if we end up with multiple GSAs in one basin. How we deal with boundary conflicts, probably not the biggest idea, but we are seeing in some areas, the issue of entities starting to gear up for adjudication because they appear to perceive that they are have-nots in a world of haves as the GSA process. So continued facilitation and continued indication of how we resolve these things would be interesting. Yep. And of course, funding. I mean, we're here in Sacramento, and
counties have to ask.
Well, I heard the governor once say that it's better to have more money than less money one time, and he said it with his typically straight face, and we can take that as axiomatically true.
And your final comment?
Is we are looking forward to further comment on the GSP regulations, further funding, and further work at the state level on interagency coordination, for instance, between the State Water Board and the Coastal Commission on SGMA compliance. We appreciate the effort and the ability to participate today.
And I noticed Mr. Gutierrez is sitting through all your testimony here, so that's
well, I appreciate and do appreciate that.
Yes, Senator Wilk can't resist asking or making one comment.
Just a very brief comment, particularly about, no, I can't resist. Supervisor Gibson, I just want to say that there's an important ingredient in all of this, because we've left to the local communities, primarily the counties, the jurisdiction over getting something done, and it requires a Board of Supervisors that's willing to confront the kinds of things you were describing and the difficulty of gaining consensus, and where there is no consensus in an emergency situation, you acted, and you started in 2013. So I just wanted to say that's pretty amazing, and you should be congratulated for that.
Thank
You and your board and previous boards, if that applies.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Yes, thank you very much. And Jack Rice, Associate Counsel, Farm Bureau.
Jack Rice with Farm Bureau, representing 43,000 farmers throughout the state, and I thank you for the chance to provide our perspective and experience with the implementation of SGMA. And although we were on record as opposing SGMA when it was adopted, since it was passed,
Thank you for mentioning that.
well, I wanted to try to justify or explain
but-
how much work we've really
But
put
on the adjudication bill last year, I really appreciate you.
Well,
your efforts.
we appreciated working with you as well. I think that was an important piece of making SGMA successful moving forward. And so we have focused on trying to educate our members about what the bill is and why they need to get engaged, and we've worked really hard at that. I have a little bit of information to pass on. But I would like to start by complimenting DWR's work, as everybody else has. They've done a remarkable
Love
job.
fest for DWR.
It is.
Mr. O'Connor said he's never heard so much.
Well, it was a good point. I mean, they've got a good team in place, and people, that builds confidence in the community, and that's going to give SGMA as good a chance as possible. So I also wanted to let you know that Farm Bureau worked with the Scott Valley Irrigation District on a groundwater recharge project with the water board staff, and that was also a very good experience, implementing the governor's, one of the governor's emergency declarations, and that was good as well. So the three things, really briefly, that we've heard about from our members and just in education are the GSA formation. That timeline, even though it's 2.5 years from when it was adopted, is potentially going to be rough for some areas to meet. And so the reasons for that is, SGMA's got a really steep learning curve. Getting the information to the water users is increasingly being recognized as a very important component and a very challenging component. Just the complexity of the law and getting it out there is proving difficult. And that is probably most difficult in those, quote, white areas, the areas that don't have an existing water district in place. And so, how do you reach them, and how do you come up with an organization? And some of the ideas to solve that, for example, a new water district, which San Luis had a head start on, they take longer than 2017. So those issues are just out there, and we'll see how that works. Everybody's trying to strive for that deadline, but that's a real issue. And then that 90-day window could also sort of trigger, the way it works is once one person raises their hand, you have 90 days and everybody else has to. And we've heard that could trigger a rush. So I don't have intimate knowledge on that, but we have that concern. And really, one of our messages to our members is unnecessary conflict is everybody's enemy. Like, there's going to be enough challenges here without triggering conflict unnecessarily. So trying to do this groundwork, the GSA is really going to shape the success of the GSP. The agency is going to shape the success of the plan, so it's worth the early effort. The second issue is for our members, farmers and ranchers, there's really not a clear place. Even though they're going to bear a significant portion, is using a significant amount of the groundwater, they're going to bear a portion of the cost and of the reductions. They don't always know where they fit. And this, again, is particularly in those areas where there's not an existing district. And one of the issues we are seeing emerge to bear in mind is that this process could sort of go into the black hole of plan development and then come out as a surprise in 2020 or 2022. And that causes us concern, because that's the situation where when landowners get a letter saying, you need to pay this or cut back your water use, if they're not kept abreast of that, and then they're going to react strongly. And so we're all working. I think everybody recognizes the value of that. And then resources, there's agencies need resources for planning. Some of them, I think, are going to need it for, or rather forming the entity. The California Water Foundation has recognized that in Sonoma County and elsewhere. Some of them are going to need help with the planning, and certainly project implementation. Storage, surface storage is a big piece of it. Continuing to grapple with the recharge issue is a big piece of it. So with that, I think I will stop. Thank you. But thank you, too, for the committee for investing a lot of time in this, because I know we have put our members through hours of trying to figure this out, so it's grateful that we could put you through that. Or wait, no, I said that wrong.
I'm not sure that was the best ending. But what's important is that the legislature every year or so engages in some oversight hearing. Dennis, you have to stay around till at least 2022 to make sure all these timelines are met, all right?
We'll have Senator Allen here.
Senator Allen, good. He'll be here for the duration. All right. Last but not least, and Dr. Juliet Christian Smith, I think you were the last speaker, the last hearing I had, so I don't know why that is.
Spot.
She's the California climate scientist with Union of Concerned Scientists. Welcome. And do the wrap-up for us.
All right, so you should all have a little fact sheet that I left for you. It's our summary of why groundwater is so important, not only now, but increasingly so as we face longer and more severe droughts and floods. And, you know, all the testimony today has already gone over how much more groundwater we're using during this drought and how we're projected to have much longer droughts in the future. So we've also heard about some of the local management efforts, and there have been a lot of well-intentioned local efforts to manage groundwater, but there hasn't been the data or the authority outside of adjudicated basins to really do so effectively. And I want to point out that numerous reviews by consulting firms, RMC Water, Stanford's Water in the West, all came to the same conclusion that prior to SGMA, the groundwater plans that were on the books were voluntary, unenforceable, and ineffective. And that what SGMA is really doing is a break from the past. The act is saying that plans have to be mandatory, enforceable, and sustainable. And the question before us really is, how do we know sustainability when we see it? And that's the critical question that right now is before the Department of Water Resources in these regulations that came out on Thursday. So I've been part of the NGO advisory group. That's about a coalition of about 50 statewide organizations that have been meeting with DWR, and I echo the sentiments that they are a pleasure to work with. And as an advisory group, our core concerns throughout this process have been transparency in data and governance, stakeholder engagement, and the use of sound science. And so I want to say first that I'm going to focus on the regulations because they just came out and they're really important. We commend DWR for requiring open source models that are in the public domain so that people can actually understand and access the data in a transparent way. We commend their approach to data management, reporting, and collection. Statewide standards are critical just to make sure you're using the same metrics from basin to basin. But there are a few places where we think the regulation falls short, and I want to point this out, that the regulations right now treat one undesirable result inconsistently from the rest. Surface water depletion does not have to be addressed within the first 5 years of the plan, unlike all of the other undesirable results. And since minimum thresholds, this concept of where significant and unreasonable results begin, those are reliant on one another. How much you can pump is reliant on your interconnected stream flows and how much you're depleting the streams, lakes, and rivers above. And so in many ways, I think this delays the implementation by about 5 years, and I'm not sure it's legally defensible. The other thing that's missing from the regulations is a quantification of environmental water uses. And it also doesn't define groundwater-dependent ecosystems, which was a key part of this law, and it was directly taken from Australia and their experience in mapping and prioritizing the needs of not only human but ecosystems. Finally, the regulations don't provide a clear requirement that plans address ongoing negative results of their actions, such as impacted communities. I mean, right now we have a lot of communities without access to basic drinking water. We're not sure how SGMA is going to interact with ongoing negative impacts and the mitigation that's needed. And finally, at the end of the day, we find the draft regulations are not adequately answering the main question: what is sustainable groundwater management? And we've heard a lot today that the act is clearly bottom up. Authority is at the local level, and no one's challenging that. But the whole purpose of the state backstop, which was one of the key revolutions of the law, was that the state now has oversight over whether locally defined sustainability is actually achieving a sustainable groundwater system statewide. Those are the rules of the game that David Gutierrez referred to. And it's no secret that local groundwater management to date has not resulted in sustainable management. And so we've been arguing for clear statewide metrics to ensure that sustainability doesn't look different when you cross a jurisdictional line or a basin line. Again, as David Gutierrez pointed out, this is a bowl. In many cases, these divisions are artificial, and this is a shared resource. And if we continue to treat it as separable and individual, we are risking the same result, which is a tragedy of the commons. Individual actors acting in their own best interest, at the end of the day, overusing or overexploiting a resource that then hurts everyone. So metrics are needed to make these regulations actionable and enforceable. I think that we have an ongoing relationship with DWR. We're going to look forward to working with them, the State Water Board, the California Water Commission, you all, and our members to make sure that these regulations really live up to the intent of the act and protect this vital resource for us, for future generations of Californians who are going to rely on it even more than we do today. Thanks.
Thank you very much for some specific recommendations. That was very helpful. Okay, so questions of these 6. Senator Allen, any questions that? No, I don't want to encourage you unless you would like to ask a question. You can ask a question. Please do. And I appreciate you spending, the 2 hours with us. I'm going to do some follow-up. Private follow-up, okay. Over to you.
You're good.
You're good too?
Okay. Public comment.
No, we're going to go on to public comment, and I wrote notes.
Chairman Masoni wants to make a comment.
You want the last word? You're the chairman, okay.
I think we're missing it, and we need to commend Secretary Laird. Under his leadership, I know tribal governments in this state have had a very good open now relationship with the Department of Water Resources. And I think Secretary Laird's leadership needs to be noted and commended. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Dr. Christian Smith's last comment on what does sustainable groundwater management look like and how it relates from basin to basin is sort of an ongoing theme I'd like to follow up on, but not at this moment. Yes, thank you very much. And thank you to all of you for your attendance and your responses. It made for a very informative, provocative discussion. And public comment. Assemblymember Levine, you're going to, how many people raising their hand would like to say a couple of words? And do you want like 2 minutes each or something? 2 minutes each, 2 or 3 minutes each. And if you, 2 minutes is good. And if you would, looking at the sergeants here, how would you like?
The mic down there is good.
There's a mic down here, or you can all sit at the table, whatever you like.
It's better if they just line up.
Yeah,
Okay.
just line up.
Just line up and let's use the mic. Oh, I see it over there on the side. Pablo, you can just stop where you are. I think the mic's coming to John White. Yeah.
You're taking off. So before public comment begins, just want to say thank you very much to Madam Chair for helping to organize a great hearing, and staff, who of course do a great deal of work as well. And then of course for all the panelists. I do want to recognize them from the stakeholders as well as the agencies. Thank you for your informative testimony. And I suppose we found a working mic.
We'll see.
Okay. You've got 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning. Pablo Garza with the Nature Conservancy. And I'll say, well, first off, thank you for holding this hearing, and thanks for your leadership on passing SGMA in the first place. And it was really important landmark legislation. I wasn't planning to make comments. I had a colleague, but she had to leave, so I will try and paraphrase the points we wanted to make. And I do want to thank the Department of Water Resources for all the outreach they've done to date. Last year, they dubbed it the Summer of Outreach. We spent a lot of hours talking to them about a lot of the important issues around SGMA. And, great dialogue. I will say, I would have told you until last Thursday this was going fantastic. And then the draft regulations have come out. And just say, we're still reviewing them. We'll be providing written comments, but we're disappointed about some of the things that are not in there. Specifically, we've been talking about the definition of groundwater-dependent ecosystems. This is a required plan element in Sigma. We've been giving input on what a definition would look like, and it's not even defined. And so I think it's important to define these things so we know what we're talking about and so we can protect them and protect the environment as we implement Sigma down the road. That's one example. And I'll leave it at that in the interest of time and say we'll keep talking, and I encourage the committees to continue to hold these oversight hearings. I think, my joke was always no one can retire because we've got 30 years to go to make this thing work. And so, Dennis is really excited about that, but thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Garza.
Jennifer Clary, Clean Water Action, and I just want to reiterate what everyone else has said. Have had a very good working relationship to DWR. A little surprised at what's not in the regulations, but we'll be submitting comments. So I just want to say that we're very cognizant of the local issue, that I work with groups up and down the state on the North Coast where they're worried about flows, year-round flows for aquatic species, in the Central Coast where 30% of the rural communities can't drink their water, and the Central Coast where you have, or the Central Valley where you have severe overdraft. And one thing we're looking for is the idea that these regulations will provide a vehicle for mitigation. So if you have a local plan that continues to cause the problems that led to the creation of Sigma, that there'll be some kind of mechanism to ensure that those most impacted by the damage are somehow compensated. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clary.
Mr. Chairman, members, my name is John White, and I'm representing the Mission Springs Water District and Desert Hot Springs. I wanted just to have the committee be aware that there's some issues to consider regarding the governance and implementation of the Groundwater Planning Agency, where you have in the statute designated the Special Act Water Agencies as the exclusive planning entity for the groundwater. In this case, there is a long history in the region of a shared basin. The Desert Water Agency is the presumed planning entity, but they are not just a planning entity, they are also a retail purveyor of water, and there's potential conflict. The Desert Hot Springs is a working class community on the other side of the interstate and the railroad tracks from Palm Springs and the other areas, and this community has a history of being overlooked and underrepresented in this process. We are hopeful with some oversight and guidance from the legislature and a cooperative spirit among the parties that something can be worked out that will be mutually satisfactory. But I just wanted to highlight that this exclusivity needs to not be a license to overlook the interests of all the parties in the region, because in fact the future of the groundwater has a significant economic development component. And it's just, I wanted to raise this for you. We have some hopes of constructive conversations. We've spoke to Senator Pavley's staff and looking forward to working through these issues, but just wanted to highlight that participation and engagement by the full community of interest needs to be part of this process. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. White.
Hi, I'm Judy Corbett, representing the California Economic Forum, who is also interested in California's economy and knowing just how much water supply is going to impact the economy. This is the most difficult issue I think I've ever addressed, so I thank you all for spending so many hours trying to figure it out. I have seen two things today that I haven't seen addressed yet, and I just wanted to throw those out to you. Sigma does mention general plans, and general plans are taken care of by OPR, and the OPR guidelines right now don't really mention very much about water, so that is something that would be worthwhile looking into. Also, the water agencies have so much on their mind, they don't know a whole lot about land use, and I think the BMPs might best be addressed by OPR rather than DWR, so I'd look to maybe give them some money or tell them to do something. And the other thing is groundwater recharge areas. You know, nature has this wonderful thing of just being able to, at no expense at all to us, take this water and put it in a savings account for us. Throughout the country, there's studies been done of cities that are showing that we're losing an awfully lot of that through being paved over. And we don't know a lot about what's happening in California with that. We do know that in Santa Clara Valley, they have already covered over 60% of their recharge areas. And so it's something to really be looking at. I think, I'm not sure that we've properly addressed that one yet, but it needs some pretty serious action. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corbett.
Hi, my name is Greg Milliman. I'm here today representing the California Water Association. We're an association of about a little over 100 investor-owned utilities regulated by the California Public Utility Commission. So I wanted to make the panel aware there's been a lot of progress made in the act, the original act, and then SB 13 to help investor-owned utilities become part of the governance structures of GSAs. But I wanted to make the committee aware that there still are challenges faced investor-owned utilities to become part of these GSAs. So we'll be working with the Department of Water Resources, possibly the State Board, and looking to maybe have some legislation come back to get a little better, clear guidance in inclusion of the investor-owned utilities as part of the GSA process. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Millman. And without any other public comment, I would say I had recognized the great panels that we had earlier and the hard work. They are all necessary for these hearings, but it would not be sufficient without the public. So thank you for participating as well, and in particular, the public hearing. Please continue working with us to make sure that we know how these laws are affecting you and how we can make sure that they're working better for California. This hearing is adjourned. Yeah, thank you very much.